Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 8 game against a very strong opponent, despite his rating being very close to mine. He was having an excellent tournament, beating much stronger players, and he's very experienced. So I have to say that I was really anxious before this game, and I was expecting a lot of preparation. Because I have noticed in his games that he knows a lot of theory. So I chose to play an offbeat opening with white. After d4, d5, knight f3, c5, maybe he was expecting me to play the London system, but as you may know, I don't play the London system anymore. I played c3, which may sound strange and look strange, but then I played g3. And this is a known variation, something that black commonly plays with colors reversed, of course. And this is basically the Schlechter Slav in reverse, where white is playing the Queen's Gambit and black is playing the Slav with g6. In this case, white is playing with g3. And that's a setup I enjoy. However, in this game, I didn't get the common attacking patterns I normally get with black. I don't know why. You're gonna see what happened. So knight f6, bishop g2, bishop f5. Of course, black has time to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain, so why not? And the engine plays dc5 here, and after a5 plays knight d4. I have to say this never occurred to me. I didn't want to take away from the center, so I just castled. And the position is all zeros according to the engine. e6. Now here, and instead of c3, in fact, the engine plays c4. And after dc4, knight e5. So you get a sort of Catalan position where you're playing for this diagonal, knight takes d4, and all hell breaks loose. Everything's hanging. White should be slightly better. I have not considered this either. I played bishop g5, which is what I normally play when I have black in this position. I'll play bishop g4. And my opponent played queen b6, exploiting the fact that the b2 pawn is now undefended, so queen b3, which is fine. And knight e4 attacking the bishop. Now, I had expected this, and I was originally intending to play bishop e3, but I wanted him to commit with h6 g5 to chase that bishop away. So I played bishop f4. They're about the same. Black should be tiny better. So he played h6, I played knight bd2, and he played g5. I have a way to save all of my pieces. None of my pieces are hanging, so bishop e3. He didn't play g4 here, but if he does, then I go knight h4, and after some trades, well, for example, knight d2, bishop d2, queen b3, a b3. The bishop should drop back, but it can also be left here. And this is supposed to be better for black than the game continuation, although I'm not a big fan of this position for black. It seems very messy, especially without the queens on the board. I don't think there's compensation from a human perspective for the weakened king side. So my opponent played a logical move, c4, and black gets this b5, b4 advance if allowed, or gets an advanced pawn on the queen side, as well as the b3 square, because I'm gonna have to play a3 to prevent b4. So queen b6 is forced. I cannot play queen c2 because of at least knight g3, and queen d1 drops the b pawn. So a b6, knight e4, a couple of trades, and knight d2. Now he played bishop g6, which I think is correct. And now I would challenge you to come up with a plan for white. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and my plan is okay. I think it's very natural. What I did seems to be the most logical continuation. However, the engine finds something else, which I have not considered. I played f3, and my intention was to go bishop f2, e4, which is fine, but it's much better to go f4. And on b5, once again, a3, you react the same way, but you challenge the pawn on g5 straight away. You can still play bishop f2 and e4. Instead, as I said, I played f3. My opponent played b5, a3, bishop d6 developing, bishop f2, and I want to go e4. Instead, once again, I should go f4, and on gf4, I should take with the bishop and then take with the pawn to forever stop e5. The queens are off the board, so it isn't really a big deal that the g file is open. Once again, this was the best continuation, and it never occurred to me. Instead, I played bishop f2, which is, again, a slight advantage to black. f5 doesn't prevent e4, so e4. f5 is a mistake. The engine says h5 should be played, but I think f5 is a logical human move, and it's not bad. It's equal. e4. And now a very surprising decision by my opponent. He played f4. Now, according to the engine, that's not a good move, but it's very annoying to play against, because now I have these two bishops that have absolutely no scope. And I had two options, either rook fe1, where I'm pinning the pawn, so something like king f7, gf4, bishop f4, bishop g3. No, sorry, my knight's still hanging. Rook e2 followed by bishop g3. Something like that. Or what I played in the game, which seemed cleaner, ed5. And after ed5, bishop h3. Again, equal. And we're both sharing the e file. My bishop on f2 is very bad, and I have no clear plan. Fortunately, my opponent's only plan to go knight a5, knight b3 doesn't really work. I mean, I'm not going to take the knight. If you don't understand this pattern, if the rooks get traded off and the knight lands on b3 and I take, then bishop a3 is a threat that threatens to queen the b pawn. So I'm just not going to take the knight on b3. He played king f7, rook fe1, rook e8, and I honestly had no idea what to do, so I traded rooks. I can go bishop d7 and on rook e7 then take, but I am going to have to bring the bishop back at some point. So rook e8, rook e8, rook e1, rook e1, bishop e1, king e7. And the only thing I have in this position is bishop c8, but it doesn't work. I played knight f1, which is fine. If I play bishop c8, then knight a7 traps my bishop if I take the pawn. If I play bishop b7, I'm just a piece down. I haven't lost it yet, but I will. You can just play, I don't know, bishop f7 defending the pawn and then grab my bishop. So I can never take the pawn, and if I cannot take the pawn, what do? Go back? Why did I play bishop c8? So I didn't play bishop c8. I played knight f1, he played knight a5, coming into b3. I played knight d2, he played bishop d3, king f2, literally waiting. The only change I can make is either playing g4 and then h4, which eventually will lead to nothing because my opponent just doesn't react, or I can take on f4, opening up some squares for my bishop, but then his bishop lands on f4, and I didn't want to do that. It seemed very scary. So I'm just waiting for a draw. I don't remember having a position with 3 minor pieces each where I just don't have a plan. And I really don't. I didn't know what to do. I can turn on the engine so that you can see what the engine plays. Yeah, the engine plays king g2. I played king f2. I just, fine. h5. Now it's a bit more interesting because I may be able to cause some issues with bishop f1, h3, h4, or just h4. So for example, let's do this, and h4. I'm hanging this pawn, so I would have to defend first. So let's go king g2, waits, h4. So this seemed interesting, but again, I couldn't see any sensible way to make progress after this. So I didn't do that either. I played king g1. He played knight b3. And of course, I'm not going to take the knight, even though I may be able to survive, but I just didn't want to deal with that. If I take on b3, then cb3, and let's say bishop d2, bishop takes a3, I have to play bishop c1, preventing the pawn from being taken. And this should be winning for black, I think. The engine gives it as -1, but I think it's worse than that. Of course, if I take the pawn, then, you know, he queens and I get mated. So knight b3, I just don't touch the knight. I played bishop c8. And this was the only critical moment in the game where he had a choice. He can either play knight a5 or knight c1. And knight c1 prepares to win the b2 pawn. How? He moves the bishop away, plays knight d3, and I have no way to defend b2. However, in the process, he's going to drop all of his queenside pawns too. So this required a ton of calculation. He ended up playing knight a5. If knight c1, I was hoping that I had calculated everything precisely, and turns out I have. So knight c1, I take on b7. He moves the bishop, doesn't have to be f5, but let's say f5. I take on d5. He plays knight d3. I play something, let's say bishop f2, not to lose my bishop. He takes on b2, and now I play bishop c6. Everything is pretty much forced. He defends with either bishop e6 or bishop d7, although bishop e6 makes little sense because of d5. So let's say bishop d7. I take, king takes, I take on f4, I can always throw that in. If bishop takes, then he's not on the pawn, so pawn takes, and now knight b1. This seemed equal to me. I mean, I'm technically I am worse despite being up a pawn because I have to babysit a3 and c3, but there's no way I can be worse. So let's say bishop e7, king f1, I'm just doing nothing. And it should be a draw. He told me after the game that he was trying to make it work, but felt it was too risky. And I agree. We looked at some lines after the game where white ended up winning, black was in trouble after all of this. So he played knight a5. I just waited, king g2. He played bishop c2. I played king g1 and offered the draw. He accepted. I mean, if you're not going to go knight b3 and allow me to take the pawn, then what do you do? And of course, it's not easy to defend d5 if you try to defend b7 with the king, and also h5. So yeah, it was a draw. I mean, in all, it was a very tough game. If we go back to one of the key points where he had gone f5 and I have gone e4 and then f4, I did not have to take on d5. I could have waited. And as you saw, this plan of taking on f4 may have been better. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. It would have kept a lot of complexity in the position, and of course he should never take on e4 because I have a passed pawn on d5 long term. So this tension, I don't have to resolve it. I can just keep the tension on the board. I can also consider playing e5 and sort of trapping the bishop, or not trapping the bishop, but forcing a trade after bishop g3. So that probably was a better option. But if you look at the engine evaluation throughout the game, it deviated between 0.3 and -0.5 from move 1 to the final move. So I think we both played okay, and a draw was a reasonable result. I mean, the only way one side could have won was if I had taken on b3 and then he wins. I had no winning chances. He at least had one trick. So that was my round 8 game. I'm going to show you the final round game very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.